Hey, Steve, when you go on and off in here, there's a little lip there. Be careful. I've almost fallen. So we've decided that that is gluten-free. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Good morning to the Good morning, and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. Beautiful September morning. We're happy to have you here in the room with us. Those of you who haven't been here before know you've heard me say how weird it's been just to have this empty room, but it's so nice to have a few over here, and I really appreciate you being in the room with us. And one of our faithfuls, George Arnold's having a birthday today. I do not sing, but on a count of three, let's all say happy birthday, George. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday, George. There you go. Awesome, awesome. And you can wish him happy birthday privately after a while. So we are live streaming. Again, those of you who haven't been in the room know that exactly noon, Andy will turn the live stream on, and we'll be joined by hundreds, if not thousands, of folks watching on our YouTube channel, also the Columbus Dispatch and some other media groups that are live streaming that we don't always know from week to week. Couple reminders. We know we really appreciate you wearing your mask, and we know you can't wear your mask while you're eating, but if you'd be so kind as to put it back on after you're finished with your meal, that would be great. We really appreciate that courtesy. Also, be sure to check your cell phones. We've discovered that the cell phones ring really, really loud over the live stream. So thank you all very much. Hope you'll make reservations to come back in a few weeks. September 23 is Metropolitan Club's annual meeting at 11 o'clock, and then we'll be going right into our program that day, which is a really excellent program with a couple of authors that have written a book about rebooting our biased brains. So I think that's going to be a special event. And a lot of our board members and new board members will be here that day as well, so you'll get to meet some of our new folks. And of course, we'll be distanced just like we are now. So thank you for being here. We really genuinely appreciate it. And Steve Marks, our chair, will be back in just a few minutes to start our program. Thank you.
Oh, that's interesting. They warned me.
They just had apparently their list of urgent people. No, you're up here. You're up here.
I'm up there, and yeah, there's my name. Okay.
Comfortable first.
Starting in a minute. Speakers are still down here. Okay.
So right about there, feeling all right?
I think that's fine.
What, Andy? Not too close?
You're actually live right now.
Okay. There you go. No funny stuff.
As we say, hot.
Hot, yes.
So let me know if you're gonna roll, and I'll still be getting these guys up here, okay? We're 1 minute? Roll, yeah, we can wait a few seconds, that's all right.
Once upon a time. I was just talking about you to Matt. Matt. No, it's not Matt. It was all right.
Go ahead, go. Perfect. Very good. Aaron? All right, let's roll open.
Hello, and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Steve Marks, Chair of the CMC's Board of Trustees and President of Hannah News Service here in Columbus. It's great to see everyone here today. Let's welcome a new CMC member today, Mandy Porcher with Beecher Hill. And a quick word about membership. Memberships make it possible. We need you, the patrons and fans of CMC, to step up and support CMC. If you join or renew, anybody can renew at any time. As an individual or corporate member, from now till CMC's annual meeting on September 23rd, we'll add an additional 2 free bonus months to your membership. Our monthly subscription membership starts at $16.95 per month, and that qualifies for this program. It's a very good deal for a very short time, so please join or renew now. You can learn more about CMC, register for events, join CMC, renew your membership, or make a donation anytime at columbusmetroclub.org. We are live streamed today thanks to our live stream partners, the Columbus Dispatch and PNC. We'd also like to thank those of you who purchased a virtual seat for today's forum. We are very grateful for this support and are able to continue live streaming services in large part because of you. Thank you. Amidst a backdrop of politics, divisiveness, and a public health crisis, the most important signpost of our nation, the 2020 U.S. Census, must be accurately completed. The benefits to residents include distribution of taxes for schools and roads and representation in federal government. Reports of low participation and a shortened project timeframe are troubling. Let's welcome our experts for today's forum. Stand Up, Be Counted Census 2020, Executive Director of the Children's Defense Fund Ohio, Tracy Nahara, Executive Director of the Ohio Women's Alliance, Aaron Scott, Franklin County Commissioner Kevin Boyce, and our host, journalist and CMC board member, Carol Looper. Carol, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Steve. As we know, the census is mandated by the Constitution. It's an every 10-year head count. The purpose, as Steve mentioned, is to know how many people are living in a household for many purposes, so that communities in a state can pay for schools, fire, police, and districting, to get 1.5 billion federal dollars distributed. So let me throw out a first question to all of you. How important is the census to our community?
Well, that's a great question, and that's why we're here, because it is essential to so many things within our community. Everything from, public services to, how businesses and corporations decide where to build their next headquarters, and also to our democracy. Let's face it, when we know how many people are counted, when we know how many people live in our community, we know what our community needs, and we know how many folks we can, have in terms of our congressional allocation. And these are just so critical to everything that we do. And, from funding, the representation, strengthening democracy, it's really the critical civil rights issue of our day. When you're counted, you're seen. And that's what we're all fighting for, right? To be seen and to be heard.
Kevin?
Well, I think Tracy really summed it up. The only thing I would add is that we're living in a COVID-19 environment where our lives have been upended in so many ways. But as I've engaged with CDC in my role as a commissioner, as I've engaged with physicians and public health practitioners, what I know for sure is that all planning, all response planning, all trying to, I can't think of the word, when trying to stop the spread of the virus, all that planning, whatever term I'm missing there, all of that is practiced and planned based on census data, where people live, where density is most highest, and perhaps where we can't navigate as easily around the stopping of the spread of the virus. And so what I'd say to people is now 2020 is one of those years where the census, unlike years before, we can really see the life or death impact that knowing exactly where people are, knowing exactly what the demographics are and the dynamics are, really allow us to be more responsive, allow us to plan going forward, and most importantly, allow us to address the issues of the day, be it, as Tracy said, building a business, building a school, building homes, whatever it is you can think of, it's all generated from using data or information around where people live.
Aaron?
Yeah, I agree. The critical nature of the census really cannot be understated, because what's quite literally at stake is our democracy. The ramifications of having an undercount in 2020 will impact the redistricting process. And in Ohio, where we have sorely gerrymandered districts, we are due for a complete overhaul of what representation looks like in our state. And so this undercount that we will inevitably have is going to have long-term impacts, not only on all of the people who benefit from public services, but also on foundations who are trying to operate to serve filling gaps for programs, right? Because when people are undercounted, when our community and our grassroots organizations, don't receive that amount of government funding that they should because of the undercount, guess who we're going to turn to fill the gaps? We're going to be looking at our for-profit industry. We're going to be looking to philanthropy and individual donors to fill those gaps. So I think, I don't want to paint a dark cloud over the conversation, but the next 10 years is going to be very financially, it will be a strain on a lot of our nonprofit organizations, and I think for a lot of businesses as well.
Now, I filled out my census form online, and someone I spoke to this morning said he had 3 different people knock on his door to do a census count, which sort of surprised me during the pandemic. I'm sort of surprised that there are people out there. But will you talk about the different ways that people can be counted?
Absolutely. So actually, this year is really, this census count is really kind of phenomenal. So it was the first year that they rolled out a web-based approach for this. So you had so many different options. You can either fill it out on mycensus2020.gov, which only takes about 10 minutes to do. You can call in your census. You can fill out through paper form, or an enumerator could potentially come to your door. It sounds like your friend had got a little extra love there, and help you fill it out. But I mean, they've really tried to make it as easy as possible, and so many different modalities of doing it. However, the challenge here really is, when the pandemic hit and the stay-at-home orders, were sent out, the Census Bureau basically ceased all field operations. And they didn't resume those field operations until just July. So, I mean, during this time when you should have had people out there, knocking on doors, having like face-to-face activities, encouraging people and their neighbors to fill it out, none of that was going on. So we're sort of behind schedule, behind the timeline of where we're supposed to be.
And speaking of the schedule, it was shortened, and the Census Bureau was letting some people go because it was shortened to September 30th from its original date of October 31st. Now, a federal judge on Saturday ordered a hearing September 17th to see whether it can be extended. You want to talk about that?
Well, I mean, the reality is it just needs to be extended. I don't think there's a person in America, if not the globe, that 2020 hasn't taken its toll to rearrange our lives a little bit and sort of call the audible so that it allows us to change our lives a little bit. And so I think it's unfathomable that we can't extend the count time so that we can ensure that communities get organized. Tracy was talking about the different ways that we go and count people, from enumerators to online to mail-in. But the reality is that you and I will do our census every 10 years. Dutiful. We trust the system, and we don't have perhaps a language barrier, but there are people in this community that are quote-unquote hard to count, and these are folks with language barriers, homeless people, people who are intimidated by the process. And so it's so critical that we have the ability, the time to get to those folks. And 2020 the year has just changed how we're doing things and how things are happening. I mean, for 2 or 3 months, we were essentially on quarantine as a community. And so we couldn't even do the normal counting process that would normally take place, even to get the word out. And so I think it's really important that that date be extended. And what we're asking for is just to allow us another month, take us to the end of October, which was the original date that it was extended to, so that we can do our part to ensure that everyone is counted. And remember, the census is about counting residents, people who live in your community. And so it doesn't have anything to do with if you're a citizen or not, or how much money you have, or what community you live in. It's really about ensuring that we know exactly how many people live in this community, and that means everybody. And so we need the time we're at currently at about a 65% a return rate here in Franklin County, and we've got to do better. There's so much at stake for Medicaid, education, Medicare, transportation, and so if we don't ensure that everyone's counted, we're missing out on literally millions of dollars to help us address important issues that impact everyone's quality of life.
There was an issue of citizenship. Apparently, the president wanted to have a citizenship question. That was overruled. But I'm wondering, there are people who are legally in this country who may not be citizens. And I'm wondering, are they counted in the census as well? People who have not taken the citizenship exam but may be here from a different country.
Absolutely. The Constitution is very clear. Everyone who is in this country is counted. If you're an international student, right? If you're here, on certain visas, it doesn't even matter. Everyone is counted. And I think that's really important because, what we've seen over the past 2 years are efforts to kind of muddy the waters around who counts and who should be counted, and, almost creating like a sense of fear, right, in terms of that. And we've seen this repeatedly, from the citizenship question to this summer, a memo was sent out basically saying that there would be a post-count analysis to determine who were citizens in the census, which of course was tapped down. But there's been efforts throughout this national count that's been occurring since 1790, right, to make it less accurate or maybe less complete than what it should be. And I think that's really troubling. And I know Erin and many of her colleagues on the ground have been doing a lot of work to kind of myth bust and do some of that outreach.
Yeah, I think this is where, again, the local trusted messengers are so important, and why we need to invest in community groups that have those existing relationships up front, because they're the distrust and what, the Commissioner Boyce mentioned previously. Yes, that's a very real thing. There's a lot of divisive messaging right now that's intentionally causing mistrust in our government. And so we rely very heavily on the local people who have authentic, real relationships to go out and knock doors or make phone calls or send emails and say, hey, I know you've been hearing a lot of things, but here's what we're really going to do with this information. So absolutely, I think that our local groups deserve a lot of credit for the counts that have been made in Ohio.
Talk about the political implications of the census, what it means politically. I was reading that each party wants it to go sort of their way, their year. And I know there are political implications in what comes out, particularly redistricting, certainly. But what are the political implications of getting a full census?
I feel like everyone in the room is looking at me on that question.
The elected person.
But absolutely, I mean, as you all know, every 10 years with the census comes a reapportionment or redistricting of how we are structured as a state. And in Ohio, we're competing with states like North Carolina and Georgia in terms of population growth, where over the last several decades, we tend to come out on the losing side and lose seats in Congress. And the expectation is potentially that we're going to lose another seat. And why that's important, for Franklin County, for Central Ohio, let me give you an example. What today is the 3rd congressional district, which is Joyce Beatty's seat. That seat was created for the very first time after the last census and after the last apportionment process. For the first time in the history of America, Columbus as a city, the 14th largest city in the United States, was represented wholly in Congress, meaning that there was a district that Columbus was represented, and it has meant tons to Central Ohio. Now, to those congressional folks who served historically in the past, it wasn't that they didn't represent Columbus's interests, but they represented the region's interests in a different way. And so sometimes, just sometimes, Columbus's interests might be different from a county, the next county over, Delaware County or Union County. It just may be that our interests are different, and so it's so important. But one other point I want to raise, because you get one shot at this every 10 years. There are no corrective measures for census data collection. There are no adjustments that are made. It should get one shot, and that's what defines your community. And you think about all the things that happen in the course of 10 years, that if you had a chance, if it didn't happen, just think how dramatic life would be. 10 years ago, did you know there were no Fitbits, there was no Instapots? I just got one the other day. I'm looking forward to using it. There were no air fryers. I just got that the other day. It's an all-in-one. I'm looking forward to it. They didn't even have ultra definition, high definition TVs 10 years ago, and Uber and Lyft and Netflix, iPads, Alexa. I mean, so you think about all of the things that occur in 10 years, and if you get one shot at it, and if we were to say, you know what, for the next 10 years, no technology, whatever we've got on that day, that's it. I mean, think of how dramatic that would be. And so it's so important that you get it right. And so from a political standpoint, we think of that in terms of everything we do. Every decision we make is data-oriented, whether it's a bond transaction or something that we're doing where we've got to look at population trends, or even transportation decisions. Where can you drive in Columbus and not see an orange cone or a crane somewhere? All of that is based on information. We do those things based on data and information rooted in the census. And so when you asked about the political question, to me it shouldn't be a political question, because it's really just a basic how can we do our best kind of question. And sometimes when we get wrapped up into how the lines are drawn and what the pencil's going to, who's going to catch over here, I think we miss the idea that we're just trying to get it right. We're trying to provide a good quality of life for everybody, and we need information to do that.
Aaron, you're nodding.
Yeah, I think what's really exciting about this year's census is, despite all of the hurdles, the investments that the Ohio Census Advocacy Coalition has made in the different nonprofit organizations across the state are going to allow us to flex more muscle in 2021 when we need to hold our elected officials accountable. And so by investing now in those different nonprofit organizations who built all of those relationships in communities, and now they're kind of gathering together like what's next, and then we'll do a good push for getting out the vote. And in 2021, we'll be ready to be a part of the process, because it will require public oversight because of the BPC, Aaron, I'm telling myself, because of the maps that were drawn 10 years ago that are not representative. So yeah, I'm very excited about in 2021 how our nonprofit organizations and community groups are going to show up to make sure that there's actually a fair process.
Yeah, and the political ramifications of the undercount are so real. And right now, at this moment of time, we are behind where we were in 2010 in terms of the counts. So there's a lot of work we still need to do. And we have 3 weeks at this point to get it done, which is not a lot of time. And what's at risk is, we're not going to be counting a lot of our minority communities, a lot of our rural communities, and a lot of our children. So I'm not sure if you guys know this, but children under the age of 5 were the most missed population in the 2010 census. So, if you have, a little baby right now, an infant, they're not going to, and they're not counted, they're not going to have another shot at being counted until they're like, in 4th or 5th grade. So we need to make sure that all their voices are represented, not just for right now, but for the next 10 years. So every single person that we're missing will basically cost us, we're leaving between $1,200 and $1,800 in federal funding on the table. And so there was an analysis done by the Urban Institute that projected Ohio losing out on around $850 million if we basically had the same count performance as we had in 2010, which is really significant. I mean, it's probably a greater amount now. So, there's so many reasons why we need to get this right. And, politically, funding-wise, representatively, et cetera.
Well, it concerns me about all of the people who are being displaced by the fires, by the floods, and I know that that's going to make it very hard to count them. I know the census asks for every single person who lives in your house, no matter what age. Have any of you seen any efforts? Of course, this judge's effort to perhaps extend it might be helpful because people might be getting into their homes. But I know there are people who are worried about their information getting out. And how does the census protect everybody's information? People can get hacked.
Well, there's, from what I've been told, and I do trust our regional census representative, Rose Simmons, she's wonderful. The census is safe. your information is federal laws that protect your individual information for over 70 years. And there's some pretty stiff federal penalties if any of that information's ever divulged by anyone who would have access to it, whether it's the enumerator or someone working, in DC at a Census Bureau or one of the regional offices. So I think that there are adequate tools in place that would make sure that everyone's information's safe and private. For a long time, for a very long time into the future.
I think that sums it up. I mean, I believe that there's always risk in technology security, but the system is designed where the information can't be shared. Even other federal agencies don't have access to the detail of census. You get the numbers that are produced are cumulative numbers, and so it gives you the broad stroke picture of how many people live in an area and not so much the detail. And I think people, there's an element of trust that the public has to give the system to allow for that collection. And that's work we've got to do a better job at. As elected leaders, that's as much the challenge as actually doing the enumeration, and that's ensuring that people trust our system, that they can count on us to protect them as we collect information, and it may where people may feel vulnerable because of the information that the census is collecting. But the other thing about the census data that I like, it's 10 questions. It may be 9 questions, but I think it's 10 questions. It takes literally 3 minutes to do, and it asks just the very basic information. So they don't know much about me other than I live in Columbus. I live in downtown Columbus, and that I'm an African American, which I want them to know. I want us to have a count on how many African American males live in downtown Columbus. Yeah, I want to know that. I may want to know that as elected official. You may want to know that if you're deciding if you want to move in the neighborhood, what the diversity is like in the community. So, I think it's one of those things where we've just got to do a better job in ensuring that people trust what we're doing with the information.
And is there a way to verify the truth of the answers? I know there was some concern about people fearing that immigration might get a hold of these statistics, and therefore they're not going to fill it out accurately. But you're saying that it's safe, the information is safe and protected.
Yeah, it's absolutely safe. And there is no citizenship question. No one can access individual responses to, come and check up on people. So, those are all really just, myths that I think are designed to instill fear and maybe, force an undercount.
Talk about the process and where all of this information is collected and how it is collated.
Anybody? Well, I don't know that I have that kind of detail. I assume it goes to some cloud. I'm kidding. But here's what I do know. I know that there's probably not a week that goes by where something that we're doing with regards to decisions that we are making that we can't access the database, and I think it's called the American Community Survey, something. But that's the more extensive data grind, if you will, that allows you to sort of peel back the numbers for research purposes. So you're not learning anything about anybody in particular, but you can zero in on perhaps where, I'll give you an example. A few years ago, we zeroed in on where the newest population of new Americans was settling in Central Ohio. And the reason why we did that was to put more services and resources in that community for English as a second language, for employment development and workforce development, for housing, better housing scenarios, because it matters to us all that everyone has resources to be successful. And so we use that information from the repository of the American Home Survey, American Community Survey. What is it?
American Community.
Yeah, that's it. American Community Survey. We use that information to make decisions that impact your life every day. And so, I don't know how granular we get past what kind of system they put it in and whatnot. But I know, and it's not, yeah, I'll be honest with you, the times I've used it, it's not a simple system to navigate. Nonetheless, the information is valuable resources for real decision-making that matters. When the schools are building schools, when we're building roads, when we're thinking about a community center or affordable housing, all of that's generated from the data that we're able to get from that system.
You talked about 65% in 3 more weeks or so. Are there solutions to getting the information out there to people in the community? You said you need to know where the new Americans are moving, but how does one get the census questions to them if they've only been, for example, in Columbus for 6 months?
Well, again, I just can't say enough about the Ohio Census Advocacy Coalition and how they've been very nimble throughout the pandemic and, of course, the different racial justice uprisings that have happened over the summer this year that have really shaken up a lot of our different plans as community organizations or nonprofits. And so the rapid response over the last month to be able to quickly move money into the field has allowed us to kind of pivot. And most recently in Central Ohio, we put up billboards in hard-to-count communities in, I think, 4 different languages: Somali, Vietnamese, Nepali, one more I'm forgetting. But ensuring that, you know, we're meeting people where they are, so that whether someone is recently arriving or someone just hasn't had a numerator come to their door yet, we've had to be kind of creative and figure out where we can leverage different relationships and opportunities to seize and make sure the message is out there very quickly. And luckily, digital really helps. Being able to do ads and again, reach people on their phones and on their computers has been really great.
Yeah, and a lot of our social service agencies around Columbus and Franklin County, they've been wonderful partners with us as well in terms of making sure that, you know, for example, I'll just give you an example here. Our Lady of Guadalupe Center, which is part of Catholic Social Services, they run a food pantry. And they've been, you know, providing census information to people that are there for services like, you know, to see a social worker or a lawyer or to, you know, access the food pantry services. And I think that it's partnerships like that where you have individuals, you know, there's obviously some trust there. They're seeking out help. And, oh, by the way, fill out your census. And, you know, at the same time, dispel some myths. So with the Ohio Census Advocacy Coalition, we're a group of around 40 organizations from throughout the state of Ohio. It's co-led by Children's Defense Fund, regionally led by the Ohio Women's Alliance. And we've been receiving rapid response grants that are then funneled out to all the nonprofits that are members that have direct one-on-one access to individuals who are in these hard-to-count communities. And we've been operating for over a year now in this space, and it's been challenging. The pandemic has made it more challenging, and, you know, all the different memos and, you know, orders around different timelines and questions, you know, have also made it challenging.
Any optimism here?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we have 3 weeks. And one of my colleagues was participating in Roundtable recently, where one of the people leading the conversation said, all of you have power to make this work. You know, you can make sure that your own families filled out the census. You can make sure that your friends and your families have done the same. I mean, obviously much more is needed, but yes, I mean, we have to be optimistic here. And also, I think with the lawsuit pending, or the hearing scheduled for the 17th, we'll find out soon whether or not we get some additional time to do the work that we know needs to be done. Otherwise, we would have spent the most money on this census with probably some of the worst results. And that's, I think, a failure of our policymakers.
I'd say I'm anxious but optimistic. I mean, 2020 is just such an unknown kind of environment, and that we don't have a vaccine yet, that the fall is around the corner with the flu looming. I think there are so many unknown factors that can detract us or distract us from sort of the day-to-day things that we need to do, like the census, just happens to be a census year. I mean, you think about it, if this were 2019, it wouldn't be an issue for the census. We'd probably be doing better. So I'm anxious, but I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic in that I think my belief about America is that part of our culture, part of the American spirit is to rise to the occasion, to take on, we're at our best during our toughest times. And I think that's part of our culture. I think that's the American way. And so I think what you'll see is people are responding, people are engaging, but they're navigating an election. They're navigating a very controversial election. They're navigating a global pandemic. They're navigating school being started again. They're navigating work changes. They're navigating the economy. And so in the midst of all of those things, oh, and by the way, your census needs to be filled out. I think that's the challenge that many American families will face, and that's why we need the extension, because we need to be able to give people that flexibility through a very difficult time in our history to be able to do that. But again, I think the American spirit is rooted in our best responses during the time of adversity and challenge, and so I'm optimistic that we'll meet that challenge, especially if we get the extension of October 30th.
Erin, any optimism in your corner?
Absolutely. We've just seen such creativity and responsiveness from the community partners who have had to navigate reaching people from a distance. The Ohio Progressive Asian Women's Leadership Organization, OPAL, did this beautiful story series online digitally called Invisible, and it was a storytelling campaign about how do AAPI women get visible in Ohio and using the census as an opportunity to be counted and lift up the community. The Delta Sigma Theta sorority, the Columbus chapter, has been doing caravans and had iPads out to collect information, or people can fill out the census right here, right then, and driving into the communities where they have relationships. So I really resonated with me when Commissioner Boyce said we rise to the occasion. We've absolutely seen our partners rise to the occasion.
We're going to go to questions from the audience and our other audience in just 1 minute, our viewing audience. But one more question. Who are the underserved communities that should be concentrated on?
We have quite a number here in Central Ohio. And actually, the Census Bureau has a map that can show you the census tracts where the lowest response rates are. But they really zero in on communities of color. Let's see, our immigrant communities. And if you look at the Columbus map, everyone knows what I'm talking about when I say the inverted T, right? That area that has predominantly our concentrations of highest poverty. Those are the areas of the city, that we need to concentrate on, because our low response rates do follow that pattern as well.
Yeah, I think Tracy summed it up. Those living in poverty, new Americans, people with language barriers. But I think it's also oftentimes a function of, like I was saying earlier, you've got a single mom out there with 3 kids, and she's hustling to get to job 1 or 2. She's hustling to get the kids off to school, get dinner made, then get to work, make sure they're doing their homework, and oftentimes the timing of when she's home and when she can do that doesn't always fit in the normal sort of 9 to 5 kind of environment. And again, it just goes back to, why would we not extend the deadline to ensure that people like that single mom, where, you look at places in the north and eastern quadrant of Central Ohio, there's a predominant number of minority single moms. And so those are the folks who end up getting undercounted, because we haven't facilitated the kind of environment to allow them to navigate all of their challenges they've got and make sure that they're counted, because they have to prioritize so what they get done that day. And we worry about those same elements in voting. We worry about those same elements in where we put new companies up and transportation issues. And so when I think of undercounted, I think of the traditional sort of people living in poverty, but I think of real specific people that we need to know where you are. We need to know who's in your household so that we can get you the type of resources you need. We can make sure that there's a bus line in your neighborhood so that you can get to that better paying job that's downtown or on the other side of town and whatnot. And so, it just depends, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point with life situations or circumstances and not necessarily like geography all the time. So we see a large population of homeless that are not counted, of, opportunity youth who might not be living in a house or, be moving from couch to couch, not having like a permanent residence, and also college students, with school or all these college students being sent home right after spring break and not coming back to their dorms. They were part of a group that was supposed to be included in congregate counting, like within their dorms. Well, I mean, some of our college towns and probably some sections of Columbus are going to have some real challenges with that.
Good point.
We're going to go to our audience questions now. Jane will ask the questions that have been coming in online. Jane?
Trip Lazarus asks the question, is undercounting fairly uniform across the country? How does Ohio compare? And are the same demographics undercounted everywhere?
So I have a little bit of data, not on all this question, but Ohio compared to the rest of the nation, we're actually doing pretty good. We have about 69.5% response rate compared nationally to 65. However, no, I mean, I have to say that there is a range, and Ohio is probably doing much better than most states in terms of its count. A lot of our southern states are struggling with their response rates, and also within every state, it's not evenly distributed, who's being undercounted, who's not. So a lot of our suburban areas have very high counts. I believe Medina County has one of the highest, and Delaware County as well, where our central cities and our rural and Appalachian areas are really struggling.
But I'll just say it too, and I want to say hi to Trip Lazarus. I hope all is well. But the only thing I'd add is that I don't want to. So the country is still growing, and it's growing at a faster rate in particularly the southwestern region. And so what happens is, Ohio is still growing. We're still getting numbers. We're just not growing at the rate that some of the southern states are, some of the, particularly the southwestern states, California, Texas, they'll pick up congressional seats, multiple congressional seats after the census. And so, there's an undercount that goes on everywhere, but it's especially stressful for Midwestern states where, we don't have the same type of growth surges that some of those southern states are. So even though we may do a better job of undercounting slightly than some of those southern states, they're growing at such a faster rate than us. It's really critical that we focus on our homeless, our student population. Tracy mentioned the student population. My son was sent home. He goes to school in Rhode Island, Providence, Rhode Island. He was sent home right when the spring started, so before the count started. And so he just went back to school this past week, and so I don't know where he's going to fall in that count. Yeah, he's counted the household, but also, now, and I guess he would have been counting the household because he was here at the time, but really he lives in Providence, Rhode Island, and so what it does is just all this year has skewed the way we are collecting data even, and I just think, again, I hate to keep pounding the board about the extension of the date, but it's critical for places like Ohio because we're in a very fierce competition with, Georgia and North Carolina and other southern states for that, the congressional representation.
And I want to remind you that the microphone is open to anyone in the room who wants to ask a question as well. Jane?
And if you don't ask a question, we'll ask you questions. So be ready.
I didn't want to ask for a show of hands on how many people have filled out their census form. I just wasn't going to do that. Jane?
I have. Kathy Kendall asked the question, are there any plans in place to get numerators back out there to knock on doors, masks and distances away from the front door? It's my understanding from our conversation already that they're already out there. Are the same number out there as at the beginning? You said they were called back and then now they've gone out. Has that workforce been reduced?
I've heard news reports that the original plan was to have about 1 million numerators out there, and that the Census Bureau has not quite met that goal, in fact, by a significant amount. And with the pandemic, of course, it's created even more challenges in that individuals, especially senior citizens who in the past have made up a large core of enumerators, they don't want to participate for good reason, especially if they don't feel like the safety equipment is there for them to do it. So no, it's not anywhere near where it needs to be, which really means that, all of us need to, in our own way, step up and reach out to people.
So this question's from Eric Brown, but I think we've already answered part of it. Is there any chance of extending the deadline for the current census? Are efforts still continuing to do so? And I guess I'll add the piece of it. It's my understanding that once a census is declared finished, that there's about 3 months of calculation. So if the deadline gets moved back, will that 3 months also be moved back? Or however long it takes? Am I understanding the
Yep.
process?
It'll have to. And there is legislation that's been introduced. I believe it was introduced in May to extend the census by about 120 days. It has not been acted on. And I know that there is a national effort from a bunch of different organizations, the National Urban League, NALIO, many different groups, trying to exert pressure on their congressional delegation to take up that legislation and get it passed as soon as possible.
Can you talk a little bit about the pros and cons of having a question on the census about citizenship or not? I never quite caught all of the nuances of why that was so such a horrific question to ask.
I'll go first on that. I mean, because the census is not about citizenship. It's about the number of people who live in the United States of America. And our founding fathers designed it that way from the very beginning. And the idea was to try to have a real understanding about who is in your country, not how many citizens we have. I mean, there are other ways to understand the number of citizens in our country for many reasons, from the Social Security numbers that we have to other medical data that will give us that. The census is important to know because it's important for a county commissioner to understand the volume of people who will use the Broad Street Bridge this year. And that's important because that kind of data and information is transferred to our engineers when they design the bridge, and they look at the load, and they look at the use, and they look at the commerce and traffic patterns. And so it really is critical that the census is solely designed to understand the count of people. In fact, as we operate in Franklin County, it should be noted, we serve the residents of Franklin County. The residents of Franklin County. There are over 1.3 million residents that live in Franklin County. And if we said, okay, we're going to count only the citizens, and we're going to plan everything accordingly, think of all of the missed decisions that we would make around housing, employment, transportation, education. And so, to me, it's our founding fathers, I think, got the principles of democracy embedded in our Constitution. They didn't get everything right. We know that. In fact, there were plenty of things they got wrong. However, one of the things that they got in terms of really understanding how a country is managed and decisions are made is just understanding the volume of people. That if you had lunch today and you said, okay, we're going to serve these 3 people, but you got 40 people that showed up, that's going to be a problem. And so I think I'm being very simplistic about it, but I think it transfers very much appropriately.
$1.7 trillion is out there in federal money to be distributed after the results of the census are in. Do we know how much we got after 2010's census? How much came to the city, the county? Anybody have that count?
Well, I can tell you how much came into Ohio as recently as a couple of years ago. It was around $56 billion. So, I mean, that's to local governments, that's state government. I mean, That's pretty significant. And I think that it behooves all of us, as people that are concerned about our communities and are invested in them, that we do everything we can to get every dollar off that table.
And one of the reasons that organizations like ours, the Ohio Women's Alliance and the Women's Public Policy Network and other organizations that center women are so passionate about the census is because actually women operate as making a lot of household financial decisions with groceries, healthcare, where the family is living. And so the amount of money that's actually coming into our state, women have a huge stake in, especially when we're talking about programs like TANF, temporary assistance for needy families, making sure that our public schools are strong. So yeah, we've all got a big stake in the census.
So if I'm a person who hasn't filled out the census, or maybe I'm not quite sure if I did, and I can't find the paper one, I don't have a computer, what should I do if I want to fill out the census?
Well, there is a 1-800 number that you can also call, and I'm sure I just knew I had that here.
If I went to my library, would they know how to help me? Or if I went to a social services agency, would they know how to help me?
Yeah, in normal times, you would just be able to go to your library and they'd have census kiosks. They do this every decade. Unfortunately, with them closed now, that's not necessarily something available. But, I mean, you should be able to, simply look up the Census Bureau's number, call the number, and be able to, fill out your census. Or if you have access to a smartphone or computer, you could go to mycensus2020.gov. And it literally takes like no more than 10 minutes, or maybe even 3 minutes. I mean, it's really simple to do.
And does that
So
provide me?
I do have that 800 number, that toll-free number. It's 844-330-2020, 844-330-2020. And then a number of apps have taken on the access point for census. So when sending someone a Cash App, my son could appreciate this. You can use the Take the Census as a note or Venmo payment and use Take the Census. And there's another app, I don't know what that app is, but on PayPal, reminder to take the census. And so I think everyone's getting involved, and so there are a variety of ways. You just gotta want to do it. And whether you have internet access or not, certainly the toll-free number is something that hopefully most people can access.
So the real paradox is a lot of the people who aren't being counted perhaps are the folks who may benefit from the services that would be coming into our community.
Exactly. You're really highlighting the disparity of who needs the money the most and the poor relationship that folks have with our government. And so I think, again, if this is about restoring democracy and making sure that there's equal representation, we need to seize this opportunity to continue building community relationships to ensure that we can rebuild that trust, because we haven't earned it.
Great. I hope you found today's forum interesting. Obviously, the theme of today is stand up, be counted. It just impacts so many facets of our life. And so, thank you for all the work you guys are doing on that. Next week, we will explore the still booming real estate and construction sector in the region with the editor-in-chief of Columbus Business First, Doug Buchanan, and a new board member at CMC this fall. Thanks to our live stream partners, PNC and the Columbus Dispatch, and to our online virtual seat patrons, thank you. A special thanks to our speakers, Tracy Nahara, Aaron Scott, Commissioner Kevin Boyce, and of course, Carol Looper. We hope to see you again soon, but until then, be well and stay safe.